Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Voices of Humanity show at prconnectionsradio.com, the voice of new media. And my name is Guy Dawson, and I have been working together with Forced Trajectory Project on a series of interviews about incidents involving the police and victims, police misconduct, and in these times where these are very current events, we are speaking with the families of people who have been victims of police misconduct. And today we have Laurie Benson. Her son, Nathan Benson, has been in custody at Clark County Detention Center for 7 years. And she has a very interesting story to tell. As usual, Nisa's son is here with me from Forced Trajectory Project. How are things going, Nisa?
Things are going well. The still hot here in Las Vegas, but we are doing well, and we're happy to have Laurie on the show, and excited to hear about Nathan's story.
And so Nisa will be a part of this this broadcast today. And at the beginning, though, I want to speak with Laurie about the circumstances surrounding her son's being shot by police in 2013, and ultimately the 7 years that he has been in custody, awaiting his trial. I guess it seems like a long time to be in custody in county jail, but we want to hear more about her story today. So welcome, Laurie.
Thank you.
And could you, yeah, thank you so much for taking the time to come and talk about your son's story today. And where would you like to start with this? How would you like to describe your son's story, being in custody, what happened to him?
Well, first off, thank you for having me on here. It's very important because the way he's been treated for the last 7 years in county jail has been very inhumane and very neglectful. He's been in there since 2013. He was shot by Metro twice in the stomach and almost died, and has been in the hole ever since without no trial. He's got a colostomy bag that has not been reversed, that needs to be reversed. They say it's an elective surgery, which it's not. It's a priority. He also has mental problems. He was in Ely State Prison for 9 years before this, unfortunately, and came out with full-on schizophrenia because of being over-medicated in there. He was on Halidol, Seroquel, and Depakote. And so he came out with full-on schizophrenia. He was out for 6 months before he caught a very serious case and put him in county jail in 2013. Prior to that, before going in, he was being chased by Metro and up on Rainbow and Alta, and they had clipped him with a police car, and he kept running across Rainbow, and they cornered him, and he had held a knife up over his head, and they shot him in the stomach twice. So he's been in there the whole time. He was in the jail ward for a month and almost died. They wouldn't give me no information because of the Confidentiality Act. They said that that he couldn't talk to me. No family members could go in there. So after he healed up, they gave him a colostomy bag. He's been in the hole, like I said, in county on the second floor. And his trial has been set numerous times, but right before trial, they say that he might not be competent for trial because of his schizophrenia. So they have sent him to Lakes Crossing numerous times. And then, but when he's sent there, they have said that he's competent for trial 3 times now. But now he's been back in the hole for a year and a half. And now with the COVID thing, I can't go visit him on the monitor. Sometimes he doesn't get out for 2, 3, 4 days without a shower. It's just, it's terrible. And I know it's going on with just more than him, you know. People don't get the opportunity to tell about this, or once they get out, or they just forget about it and, you know, don't do anything. But it's important to bring awareness to this issue, for sure.
Can you tell us more about the circumstances surrounding his shooting back in 2013?
Um, he'd been out about 5 months, and like I said, he got out of Ely Max prison, and he was over medicated. And these psychotropic meds they gave him take 6 months to wear off. So at first he wasn't himself and very zombie-like, and then around the first month, second month, he was himself again, you know. But then he started getting paranoid in like the fifth or sixth month. He was paranoid. There was a lot going on, and our roommate, she was murdered, and nobody was there at the house when it happened. Uh, they they're still not sure who did it. I have not seen evidence or anything like that, but he has been charged with it. So with him being paranoid the way he was, um, he had been running the streets for 2 days after her murder, and that's when the cops had caught up with him, and that's when he got ran over by the police car and then shot twice. And because they, you know, he's a murder suspect, and still to this day he's still just a suspect. And I don't know why the public defender's office has not investigated his case at all. Like, um, I've seen the discovery, and there's not like a lot of evidence against him. It could be, like I said, numerous people because of her affiliation with things and people. So they had him on surveillance camera an hour after it happened. That showed nothing. I don't know. I'm not sure, but that's the reason why right there that he was shot by Metro.
It just seems a little bit, more than a little bit, odd for somebody to do 7 years in county jail and not be tried or released. What is
Well,
the story that you're getting? I know he must have some legal representation, right? He has a public defender that's working with him. What is the public defender telling you about this?
well, Christy Craig, like I said, the assistant deputy public defender. She's like right below the main guy. That was his public defender for the last 6 years, and she used to tell me all the time, I can't tell you anything, you know, pretty much, when she didn't want to tell me anything, you know. And she would want to tell me, like she said, she was just disgusted with the system when it came to Nathan's unique case. She was disgusted with it because she had tried to sue Lakes Crossing. My son was part of a class action federal lawsuit about 4 years ago. And like I said, it got thrown out by the federal judge because the state of Nevada said that they were going to open up a institution down here because they only have one in northern Nevada in Sparks. So they said they were going to open up one down here, which they never have, as far as I know. With his case, I talk to people. I try to get people's opinions about it, and they say, well, maybe since he's not taking a deal, they're just dragging it on, and they don't want him because it costs money to go to trial. But this has gotten out of hand, and I thought maybe, you know, they would keep him in Lakes Crossing, but nobody stays there permanently. I guess it's just a transitional place. But every time that he is sent there and sent back to county, he is found. They find him competent for trial, and he sits there for another year until his trial date, and then right before his trial date, they cancel it. So I'm surprised that right now, but now he's got another public defender, and that public defender says that he is going to trial for sure next month. And that's it. You know, like he doesn't really elaborate or tell me anything either. You know, I ask questions, and he just pretty much shuts me down. So.
Yeah, I would imagine this has to be agonizing for you to go through 7 years of having such uncertainty
Yeah.
and really not having any idea, right? What I'm getting from you is that you really don't know what is unique about, or do you have any idea about what makes his case so unique that they would keep him in isolation basically for 7 years in county jail?
I don't know. I've watched the inquest hearing where the sheriff justifies the fact of Metro shooting him, and there are some discrepancies that I have with it that don't sounds like what happened, but not what's in the preliminary discovery papers. Uh, Maybe they're concerned with that, or something with his case is because there's a lot of people that are mentally ill that have murder charges that don't sit there this long, and uh, I just can't put my finger on it. And it's been hard because my son is paranoid, and he doesn't want anybody to come visit him. He don't want to talk to anybody really. He doesn't even ask for commissary, and he has never talked to me about the case one time. He doesn't talk about it. And this is a woman that was my very good friend that died. Um, the reason why he's in there, and it was his judo instructor from when he was 5 years old, and she had just took him to look for a job the day before, and took him to get his driver's license the day before, and somebody aggressively stabbed her 39 times, and I just can't see my son doing that. But that's besides the point. Besides the charges that he has, the way he has been treated inhumanely. I went in there to see him. He's been over medicated there too, or under med. I don't know what, or they gave him something in there because he was talking in tongue, and I yelled out and screamed out, and then they kicked me out of visiting me and got the nurse, and and then I couldn't see him for like 4 months after that, and so I'm just surprised that he is still breathing air. To tell you the truth, what he's been through, and I don't think anybody could come out, with a level head after what he's been through.
And you gotta, from my perspective, 2013 was a really long time ago.
I know.
And so I can imagine for you having to go through this, what are the stages that you go through? Because one of the things that I do know is you're doing this broadcast partially because you want to help other people who might be experiencing something like this to get an understanding of what's going on. In 7 years of having him being in there, can you describe what are the kind of layers of the onion that you are, you know what I mean? This has definitely got to be in layers, the experience that you're having over a 7-year period of time. I'm looking back to 2013, and I was a much different person in 2013 myself than I am now. For you, what is this like? So many years going through this, the emotions, and can you kind of sum that up for us?
It's been pretty crazy, it's been overwhelming, and sometimes I just don't want to think about it. But him being 3 or 30 years old, he's still my son, and I care about him just the same, even though he's of age, and he's been through a lot, and nobody deserves to go through what he's been through, guilty or not. They need to make a change. There's people that are dying, that they're starving to death in city jail, county jail. I was in jail once myself a long time ago and witnessed some people being physically abused in there. And I have friends that's been in there, and I've heard stories, and I can only imagine what he's been through, especially when they're on meds and he can't think straight because the psychotropic meds make you brain dead, you know? So they won't have to deal with him or anything like that. And he talks to nobody and in a room by himself for 23 out of 24 hours a day for years. I mean, nobody I know would be able to deal with that, you know? And I still talk to him once a week. You know, I miss his calls once in a while because they have him call like at 4 or 5 in the morning while I'm sleeping. And he sounds all right. He's very no emotion, you know, no highs and lows. He has, you know, but you know, I don't know exactly. You know, when you ask me that question, I don't know why his case is so unique and what is going on. The only thing I can think of is that there is something there that that's not right. You know, I mean, he told me at once upon a time, like a year after he was in there, his colostomy bag got infected and he went to the jail ward, and his public defender said, I can't tell you anything. Your son is critically ill he's got an infection and we can't tell you nothing. And he won't give us approval to tell you anything, which I'm sure he didn't say that, but he was incoherent or whatever, you know? And they're trying to tell me this whole time I've been fighting with them for them to reverse his colostomy bag, and they sent us an elective surgery. And then he would go to the state, which is the institution up there, mental institution, for a month, and then the state would throw it back on the county, and the county says, no, do it up there in the state. And now they tell me it's an elective surgery and it's not necessary. Well, it is. What if you had a crap bag hanging outside of you and they're not doing nothing about it and it can get infected? You know what I mean? Like, he's not in the most sanitary place, you know? So I don't know. I think they've maybe done some really some stuff that just ain't right. And I'm sure that I'm missing some things telling you, you know what I mean? Because there has been a lot that has went on that's been unreal. But I'm glad you're giving me this opportunity to talk about this.
At what point did you decide to go beyond just working with the public defender and to seek out an advocacy group to help you with this? What made you decide to do that?
5 years ago, I started. I just happened to come upon NISA this last year from a friend. Thank God. You know what I mean? Because I don't know anybody that is doing what she's doing, you know, and this needs to happen, you know, so much, you know. And I had been to the ACLU years ago and to Nevada Cure. I've been to the county commissioner's office, to the manager of the county commissioner's office 10 times, I'd say. And I would call them every other week up until last month. They kept stringing me along. Jeff Wells is the name of the clerk of the county commissioner, and his secretary, oh, we'll help you out, we'll do something, and then it never happens. I wrote Carson City up there to the governor. The advocates for Reno, for Las Vegas. The woman that goes in there that does church in there. I'm not sure what her title is. I've talked to her to see if she could help me, and she said, sure, I can help you. And then twice. And then when she found out who my son was and his case, she came back with me with a different tone and everything and said, I'm sorry, I can't help you out. So it's just been, it's been crazy. And I'm the only one family-wise, really. His dad passed away 20 years ago, and he has 2 sisters, but they're kind of judgmental about the whole thing, you know, about from the get-go. And so they don't visit him, but they care about him. But I'm the only one family member that has been trying to fight for him. Nobody else.
And how has this advocacy that you tapped into 5 years ago helped you on this as you're continuing to navigate your way through a case that just goes on and on and on. Whatever happened to speedy trial? That was the kind of thing that I learned in history books was one of the rights of Americans is that you receive a speedy trial. But aside from that, how are these the advocacy helping you out as you continue to try to navigate through this?
Up until Forced Trajectory Project, they're the only ones that have done anything, that have even listened. Nobody's ever even really given me the opportunity. They don't care. It's taboo. There's only like 5% of people that have full-on schizophrenia, in the country, they say. And people don't know about it because what the definition of it is that they cannot decipher what's real and what's not. It's not like split personality or whatever. And they do hear voices and stuff, but it's so taboo, I think, and nobody really wants to deal with it until maybe it hits home, or maybe they will disown that person when it hits home. I don't know, but I think they just can't relate.
So you think it's the mental health aspect of this that's causing the delay more than anything else? Just the fact that obviously he's got mental illness, and it's just them not wanting to deal with that. I mean, there are people coming through the court system every day who have mental illness, and they don't have 7-year stretches before they're tried for crimes.
You're right, and I don't know. To tell you the truth, I don't know and have not gotten any answers, and it's just been in limbo. And for me to get a real attorney, let's say, not a public defender, is $25,000 to retain an attorney for a murder charge. So that's and I've reached out to Nevada Legal Services. Nobody just really wants to touch his case, really, and nobody. If they're all affiliated, it's against, if somebody is in the same kind of the same job occupation, it's unethical for them to go against one of their people that are in the same kind of job. I'm not explaining this very well, but it's unethical for them to go against or say anything against the other let's say a city jail or county jail from like Nevada Cure, or from let's say the county commissioner's office, But Christy Craig, I'd have to say, the public defender there, she did all she could do, but she said her hands were tied, and she was just disgusted with the whole thing, with the system, with everything, the whole system. She was not afraid to tell me that. But she dropped this case this last year. So.
Nisa, I know you're very knowledgeable about this case. Would you like to weigh in on the circumstances, and in particular for me, for there being 7 years of not being convicted, not being acquitted? And I was always under the impression that one of the basic rights of Americans is to receive a speedy trial. How does something like this happen? What is your perspective on it?
Thanks, Guy. Well, just like we were talking about last week about how police departments like Metro aren't very official, right? They don't have they don't have certain protocols, and then when those protocols aren't followed, and let's say a situation results in the death of somebody, they blame the fact that they don't have protocols. And that's the reason why they can't be held accountable. And this is the same situation. We have a number of people in CCDC, in pretrial detention, who have been sitting in jail, like Nathan Benson, for 7 years, 10 years, et cetera, who have not ever been convicted of the crime. They've been charged, but they're just sitting there. And since no one is able to challenge, the speedy trial, the right to a speedy trial, and then of course, speedy could be, what is that exact length of time? Well, that hasn't yet been defined. And so that's what allows for so many people to be sitting in pretrial detention with public defenders, hands behind their back, et cetera, et cetera. So, this is a very unfortunate situation. Nathan Benson is one amongst many who suffer from mental illness, who are stuck in solitary confinement, who are drugged up on a regular basis by the state. When he was released to Laurie after juvenile detention, they didn't give any instructions on how to help Nathan get off of these really powerful drugs. His mother was not given proper instructions on how to handle her son, and so and then all of a sudden, the situation happens, and he was arrested for it. And the circumstances in which that happened were also unclear of. There, that in and of itself, whether or not Nathan was even involved in the homicide, is questionable, right? And so it's just really a travesty, and again, another example of how our justice system really isn't a justice system, and in fact, I would call it an injustice system, and impacts people like Laurie and so many others.
Yeah, is this really just a matter of economics more than anything else? People who have money don't sit in county jail for 7 years. I mean, I've never heard of someone who was a wealthy person sitting in a county jail without having a trial for 7 years. Do you think it's a matter of the money more than anything else? What do you think about that?
It's mind-blowing.
Yeah, it's mind-blowing. I think most definitely money protects people. This is a country that obviously awards the wealthy. It's a country that protects the wealthy and the 1%. And so, yes, I would say most definitely that if you're not in a vulnerable position, if you have affluence, if you have a reputation, maybe your family has a reputation, maybe your family owns property or is a public figure, then you are going to be protected by those things. Whereas someone like, Nathan Benson, who, comes from a working class background and suffering from mental health, so he doesn't have the ability necessarily to defend himself, is someone who is vulnerable, right? The mentally ill, the people that are suffering from mental illness are most definitely very vulnerable in the state of Nevada and across the country.
Yeah, I have an understanding of this. I have a brother who's schizophrenic, who's been in and out of the system for many years. So I'm not all knowledgeable about this, but I have quite a bit of a background dealing with my younger brother who has the medication that you're describing. He's been on that medication. I understand what it does. I mean, he truly is a schizophrenic. My brother became one at a young age. And so I know that definitely, based on some of these experiences that he's had with the legal system over the 24 years that he has been schizophrenic, a lot of questionable things have been done. And for you, Laurie, you've got this relationship now with Nisa. Tell us about how partnering with her and Families for Justice has been something that has enabled you to be able to continue on with this struggle.
Well, for one, just like what we're doing right now, she's hooked me up with you to talk about his situation and bring awareness. She is not personally, is invested in this personally. Doesn't have a family member that is going through this, but she just as well is fighting for people like us, more so than anybody I know. And she sees what's going on. She hears it from us and listens. And when I call her, she calls me back. It's not like some of these other places that when I call, I never get a return call. And I know the ACLU, they, I know they're nonprofit and they've got lots of cases, but I mean, in his circumstances, you would think that somebody would wake up and say, hey, we better do something about this, somebody. but Nisa has. She has, you know, even though his case is different, you know, and he's still breathing air. He has not died from being shot by Metro, but close enough, you know. And I would hate to see something happen to him, you know. The over medicating, I mean, is just, you know, letting somebody out on the streets for one after 9 years, and being diagnosed. He never had schizophrenia when he went in there. He was 18. He had one charge as an adult for a robbery, and but he was gang related. So, but after the 6 year in Ely in a room by himself, threw him into schizophrenia, I guess, as they say. Again, they couldn't tell me a whole lot, but how dare they let him out doing every minute of his time out on no paper, meaning not supervised by a parole officer or anything, and just dropping him off out of a van and with no meds and cold turkey off these psychotropic. I mean, it's just setting him up for failure for another cases like he got, you know. And that's why we see all these homeless people out on the street, you know, because nobody cares. It's the way it seems to me. And it's just a vicious cycle. And they just, mental health, they take them in for a second and throw them back out on the streets. We don't care about them. That's how I see it.
And Nisa, we do these interviews with people, and they all have very different perspectives in terms of their interaction with the police. You know, some die, some are injured, some are falsely accused. This particular interview with Laurie seems to have a real focus on the mental illness aspect of all of this. And because mental illness is so prevalent, the way that Laurie was talking about a second ago in our society here in Las Vegas, we see a lot of people who are obviously suffering from severe mental illness, as she mentioned, who've been let out onto the streets, and who are also in the judicial system.
What Christy Craig told me was the mentally ill people don't vote. That's why they have no rights, and that's why it is the way it is, which sounds crazy to me, you know.
I want to mention also that, you know, another issue that this you know, Nathan's case, which is to me a multi-layered issue, which really exposes how corrupt the system is the fact that he hasn't healed from his injury from 2013. He still has a colonoscopy bag. His injury from being shot in the stomach has never been allowed to heal because CCDC considers this an elective surgery. Now, Terry Rogacheski, who was on your show a few weeks ago, his arm almost got amputated because when he was shot by police 3 times, his shoulder was injured. And so he would walk around, and he's also a medic. He's a paramedic. So he knows, you know, what he needs to heal. And he was bleeding when he was in jail, and he asked the nurse for, you know, for help, for a dressing. And she literally gave him a Band-Aid for a bullet wound. So the medical care in CCDC is horrendous. And I mean, it's awful. I can't even imagine the fact that this poor man, Nathan, has been, one, not able to heal from a shooting that happened 7 years ago, and what are the consequences of that to his body, right? We don't even know what that looks like. And then 2, if he's mentally ill, why is he then constantly kept in solitary confinement? That can't be good for somebody who's suffering from mental illness. So there's the issue of medical care, the lack of medical care. There's the issue of how you treat those who are suffering from mental illness with the, you know, drugs and no drugs or whatever it is. Or, you know, is jail really an appropriate place for someone who's suffering from mental illness? And then there's pretrial detention, which he has been in for 7 years, which is not speedy. And then there's also the fact that he's been kept in solitary confinement. So to me, there's a multitude of issues here with Nathan's case. And it really is a horrendous, it's atrocious, it's egregious. And the fact that elected officials and public defenders and everybody involved in the system continue to perpetuate these atrocities is beyond me.
And the public defender even said, she's like, she was just so disgusted with the whole system. Like I told you guys, she's the one that was trying to sue Lakes Crossing, and the judge threw it out. And she knows, she couldn't tell me, but she knew something. She knew it was wrong, but her hands were tied. And I think that's why she just stepped out of his case, because she just was tired of seeing this go on. And now his new public defender is very nonchalant about it also, which makes me very angry. Makes me angry, like no big deal. Now, I mean, if you Google his name, Nathan Benson, you'll see pictures of him, and you'll see the difference. I mean, you can tell that he was on meds or something had happened to him, and they're unfortunately they're just profile pictures from county jail and from prison. But if you Google his name, there are some stories about him and the Inquisition on there, if you want to learn more about it and just hear about the story more.
Well, so much of the spectacle or the notoriety right now that is going on in America and around the world is about police brutality cases. The external, the one that gets videotaped that everyone sees, the extreme version. Not that this isn't an extreme, because this is a very different extreme. And my question, Nisa, is how do we get more of a understanding? How do we get the word out about, obviously we're doing it with a platform like this, as we do with all the other cases that we talk about. But because these types of stories, I never hear very much about it. I don't think that probably 90% of the population has any idea of what is truly happening within our justice system. What are some of the ways that we can start to address this beyond the sensationalism? And not to say that these cases are not important, where people are dying at the hands of police through brutality that's blatantly being done. Definitely those cases are very important. But from the conversations we've been having and the people who we've interviewed over the time that we've been broadcasting Voices of Humanity, it seems like there are many, many more cases similar to Laurie's and Nathan's than there are these sensational stories. How do we work at getting some of these issues addressed that are the majority of the stories out there?
Well, that's a very tough question to answer, Guy, because a large part of our challenge here in Las Vegas is our mainstream media. Our mainstream media which is corporate, is who owns the corporate media? Well, that will answer the questions in regards to why these stories aren't being focused on. Right? We have this situation where it's really systemic. It's not just. We can't just look at the police department and say it's the police department. It's the police. It's the police union. It's our laws and how they're created. It's the courts. It's inside the jails. I mean, it really is a very macro, wide, systemic issue in this state and across the country. I think that one of the ways that one of the areas, or some of the areas that we need to focus on is journalism, is finding out, investigative journalism, finding out these stories. And that literally, is the work that we do. We go directly to the source, like Laurie, the mother of Nathan Benson, to find out what has happened to her and her son. And then, we partner with people like yourself who are willing to, have these stories on their platforms, right? But again, this is independent media, so it's difficult because we don't have the same platform and reach as Fox 5 News or Review Journal, which is very problematic because, again, they're not interested in stories like this. They might blow a story like this up one time because it's so sensational, but there's no ongoing effort from the journalism community to really dig into the atrocities that happen continuously over and over again in our society. And so that is a challenge aspect of it. But I would say definitely independent journalism plays a very big role in and can potentially play a larger role in raising awareness on these issues. But then there's also education, right? So, you know, continuing the conversation, educating different community organizations. Then there's also the coalition building aspect and organizing, right? So as these cases come up, I'm looking at cases like Laurie's and looking for other cases that might be similar. And then I'm passing it to my colleagues who work in legal services and say, hey, is this something that we can make a class action lawsuit? Is this something that we can, you know, blow up in the courtroom? So there's a lot of moving parts. It's like a big, huge puzzle that we need to piece together. But we can't do this alone, right? I can't do it alone. Force Trajectory can't do it alone. Laurie can't do it alone. And you can't do it alone. So we need to continue to bring people to this place of listening and understanding and get them to commit to this movement for human rights, right? We can't, it's just like the whole thing I say about democracy. We can't live in a democracy if people don't participate in it. If we don't participate in democracy, that's not a democracy, right? It's the people who are calling the shots that are making things run, right? So we have to get more people involved. We have to continue to reach out and stop people and say, hey, do you know about this issue? Have you been impacted? We have to continue to make these connections. Just because, you know, we've become so fragmented as a society that we've forgotten about, you know, who we are as people, how we're all human beings at the end of the day. We all eat, shit, and sleep. You know what I mean? Sorry to excuse my French, but I mean, that's the reality. It's like, if there's one violation, just like what Martin Luther King said, I'm not verbatim, but if there's one, you know, injustice to one is injustice to all, right? And that is really a principle and value that I live by.
It's about how we treat each other, humanity. You know, that word is so important, humanity. Just, you know, common humanity towards each other. You know, when you see something wrong, you know, you just don't, you know, just ignore it and go on with life, you know, and it just gets worse usually, you know, and it's just not right. It's, I mean, for them, I mean, for people in higher positions, I can't see how they can just say, oh, well, you know, I mean, like, and just tell me and just string me along like the county commissioner's office. I don't get that. I mean, I thought she empathized with his situation, but that was just to keep me at bay, I guess, you know, so I wouldn't keep calling them, you know. So,
Laurie, if you could see the result that would satisfy you out of this whole situation with your son having been in custody for 7 years and all the trauma he's experienced in there and all the trauma that you've experienced being his mother over the course of those 7 years, what would that look like? What would satisfy you with this case? What are you looking for?
well, like I just said, people just taking into consideration people's situations, and it starts from, you know, being the homeless also, you know, mentally ill and the homeless, making that a priority instead of like the U.S. Senator had said, oh, well, that's the first thing they cut in the budget is the mentally ill, the for funds for the mentally ill. They cut those first. We need to make that a priority and you know, not be so into ourselves and about just caring about people in general, and not allowing this to go on. You know, I mean, I know they got to be tough in CCDC. I know they got a lot to deal with. You know what I mean? But in special circumstances, to watch this go on is inhumane. Again, that word, humanity, inhumane. You know, I mean, it's black. You know, it's not black and white thing, but I mean, it's like there's, you know, no gray area. You know, it's right or wrong. You know, it's wrong. So. I don't know else how to put it right at this moment, but I just hope that people, you know, will, when it brings awareness to them, that they will think about it, and the city officials will think about it and do something, you know, to change this. because we are like one of the worst cities in our country when it comes to taking care of our mentally ill and our homeless.
Well, one of the things that we know is that this kind of thing, it starts at the grassroots level, like Misa was talking about a second ago. And most, surprisingly, you wouldn't think it would be that way. You would think it would just be legislation that would cause these types of changes. But the legislation never gets promoted until things start happening at this type of a level. The acknowledgement that you were talking about, Misa, and will you speak to that? Because I'm sure there are a lot of people out there who are upset about this, who hate to see hear stories about someone being 7 years and just don't understand it, find it to be humane. You know, what can the average person do to make this better for people?
Well, one, they can share this interview. You know, they can share this interview. Two, they can, get involved with organizations that work on this issue. Mass Liberation Project, which is another organization that I'm a part of, we work on issues like this, advocating for people who have been imprisoned. Maybe it's wrongfully, or maybe they're mistreated inside prison. We reimagine different ways in which we can change legislation, and then in the long term, looking at a world without police and prisons, right? What does that look like? I mean, the idea of policing and prisons is really archaic. It's really about, okay, you did something wrong and now we're going to stick you in a cage. But then it's called the Department of Corrections. Well, what are you correcting? What are you rehabilitating? If you're sticking someone in a cage as if they were an animal, and in my personal belief, I don't even believe that animals should be in cages either. Where is the corrections? Where is the efforts to rehabilitate people that might be struggling with behavior issues or psychological conditions? We just, in general, we have to be a more humane society. And so I think a good, important place to start is to educate yourself about a topic. I think it's important for our young people to, it's important for them to be expressing themselves, using their First Amendment rights to protest what's happening around the country. But it's also more important to get locally involved and locally invested, because we can't change this nation. We're one person, right? We can't change the entire nation. But what we can do is we can get involved and be invested in our local community. And once we get people who are, Las Vegas residents, Nevada residents who are invested in making Nevada a better and safer place to live, we will start to see change. And I truly believe that. It's really about engaging people and getting them to educate themselves and find out how they can help connect those dots.
Yeah, we are the change. I know that's a cliche that they talk about all the time, but I agree with you, Nisa. It's absolutely true. The change starts with us. It's not just a cliche. It's the reality of where change starts. And for you, Laurie, before we were on air today, one of the things that we were talking about is how part of your interview that you're doing is to empower other people who might be experiencing a situation like this, or who in the future will experience something similar to this. And for someone out there who might be going through this, or who hasn't gone through it, what would be some of your advice to them? If you've got a son or a daughter who's in custody for years and years at a time, they may or may not be suffering from mental illness. What could they do differently than you've done that might be helpful to them, starting out with knowledge in advance?
Well, the one thing is that, like I said, it's only been me, but if anybody has this same sort of situation, or their family member is in the same sort of situation, the more support you get, strength in numbers, family, friends. A lot of my people would rather not talk about it, and just go on and not see the reality of it, Like I said, it's it's hard to talk about. People don't want to hear about it, but it is a fact, and it is what's going on. So I would say for them to make sure that you stand behind your family members and watch them every second of the way and get as much information as you can, and don't give up on them, because they're in there and they have no rights. When they're in there, they're under their thumb, and they have physically, mentally, they have no rights pretty much when they're locked up, and like if they act out like my son did for one time, acted out in Ely, and he was given psych meds, over medicated, because maybe because he was losing his mind after being in a room by himself for so long. Any of us would go through the same thing, Instead, they don't deal with it, they always just over medicate him and mentally mess him up even more. So make sure you just keep in touch. Make sure you know what's going on with your people. Get a power of attorney. Whatever you got to do. So just don't lose them in the system, because they will take advantage of it if they don't have family members looking after them.
And Nisa, I know you've been engaged in this work for many years, and of course, there's a heightened sense of all of this right now because of the circumstances that are going on. But do you feel that after all these years, a lot of the hard work that you put in, are you seeing a heightened awareness amongst people about things beyond the extreme versions that we're seeing in the capitalist traditional media? Are you seeing that people are becoming more open to learning things about people like Laurie and like Nathan, that these types of situations are prevalent in our world? Are you seeing more of an openness to learning more about that right now?
I think there definitely has been an opening, since George Floyd's killing. We ever since his tragic death, we've been our phones have been ringing off the wall, so to speak, for over 6 months now. But the problem is that we're still not connecting in a way that we need to make effective local change. And that's kind of my concern, because I see distractions. I see a huge chasm between generations. So you have young folks who are just learning about police violence, who are really upset about it, but then there's this space that needs to get kind of brought together between those who have been active in the movement for years and those who haven't, right? And so there's that like bridge that has to get built, and that takes work, that takes conversations, that takes meetings, that takes humility. And social media is a really big distraction. Our young people are living in a very confusing time. We all are living in a confusing time. I hate to say that I'm pessimistic. Capitalism and racist capitalism is the foundation of this country, and it's not something that is going to be easily dismantled, nor is it something that those in power are going to be like, oh, right, these are some issues that we need to change. Here, let's change them. They created this system on purpose, right, to stay in power. So it's not likely for them to be like, oh, I'm just going to answer the demands of these people because, they want us to share our power. So, again, I hate to sound pessimistic, but I do want to say that I am optimistic in this period of time, in that it is opening up space for conversations that haven't been had, that have needed to have happened long time ago. And I also want to mention that what's not talked about, that we haven't talked about yet on this interview, is the fact that people like Laurie, families who have been impacted by police violence, again, still have no support. All these years, 7 years without her son. I can't imagine the pain that she has been through, the uncertainty, the days of just wondering what's going on, what is going on with my son, How are they treating him inside? I mean, I can't imagine the strife that she has gone through over the course of these years. And there really needs to be an awareness of how, families suffer, how state-sanctioned violence does not just hurt those who are actually physically hurt by the state or imprisoned by the state, but we have to think about those who are on the outside, their loved ones are being impacted, and how that stops their life, how that traumatizes their lives, how children are impacted by this. And so again, these are just conversations that need to be had. We need to be connecting with our mental health community organizations that instead of being busy tooting their public relations mottos and whatnot, they really need to be doing the work. We really need to, they need to be knocking on Laurie's door and saying, hey, we're so sorry for what you've been dealing with this for so long. How can we support you? And again, I really hope that it's kind of like when we think about documentaries that, or journalism stories that really make a big impact. Well, making a big impact is one thing, but what's the next step? And so we have to be more invested in just vicariously listening and watching. We have to take action, right? And that really comes from a place of asking those who are directly impacted how we as a community can serve them.
If I could say one thing real quick, my son goes to court. Supposedly, his trial is October 16th at 1:45 p.m. And I'm asking if anybody wants to support him to be there at that time. And I believe that maybe more people show up, it'll make a difference somehow.
Well, we appreciate having the opportunity to speak with you today, Laurie, and to hear your story and your. I want you to know, as I had mentioned before you even came on the air today, the bravery of being able to do this, especially 7 years of your life committed to getting justice for your son, is just commendable. And I really am hoping that if any way this broadcast can help in the bringing together of all this so that your son gets the justice that he deserves to have as a citizen of the United States, right? We're all citizens of this country who are supposed to be under a fair playing field where we all receive justice. Yes. And I don't see that happening in your son's case, and I hope that it does. And as always, Nisa, you being here and our partnership with Forced Trajectory Project and Families for Justice, it's just a way that we can be the change that I talked about a few minutes ago with these broadcasts, talking about it, coming together as a community to gain a greater understanding of things. And policing in general, I've learned so much from these broadcasts about the way that policing is done, and I'm looking forward to more broadcasts. Not the fact that we have to bring on people who are experiencing violence at the hands of police. I wish, and I always say that during these broadcasts, that those weren't the circumstances. But because they are, us having this platform to be able to talk about these things and bring on people like you, Laurie, to empower you and take a step closer to justice and greater humanity is what the Voices of Humanity show is all about.
Yep, it is. You're right. And just treating each other with some respect. That's all, just some respect and some sympathy. Go ahead.
Yeah. And we thank all of you out there who tuned into this podcast. You're at prconnectionsradio.com, the voice of new media. We've got a host of shows that are going to be coming up on the Voices of Humanity. Of course, the things that we're working on with Forced Trajectory Project, and another aspect of mental illness that we're going to be touching on with another show is about mental health in the pandemic. Boy, there are a lot of people who are experiencing challenges with mental health in these times. And so stay tuned for more broadcasts here at this network, prconnectionsradio.com, the Voice of Humanity show. And hey, take care of yourselves. And as Laurie said, be a little bit more human with your fellow human being.
Right.
It's a very simple thing to do, and I think we really complicate it as people. How hard is it to be a little bit more human with your fellow man? Let's practice that today, tomorrow, and every day. Take care of yourselves, and we'll see you soon with the next
Thank you.
broadcast.